On Christmas Day 2006, 18-year-old Ryan Waller failed to show up for his family's Christmas dinner, so his dad called the police to do a wellness check. When the police got to Ryan's apartment, they found that he had a terrible black eye that looked like he had gotten into a really bad fight, and they could see into his apartment a woman who looked to be sleeping on the couch behind him. They kept asking Ryan who this woman was and what was going on, and Ryan kind of kept saying, "I don't know," and getting defensive. Eventually, police entered his apartment and found that the woman on the couch was dead. This woman was Ryan's girlfriend, Heather Kwan, and she had been shot to death. So Ryan was brought into the police station to be interrogated to find out what happened to Heather. And as you can see, he had an extremely bad black eye, and like I said, it looked like he had been in a really bad fight. The interrogation that ensued for the next hour was extremely frustrating. Ryan basically kept saying, "I don't know," and not giving any answers. He was being really confusing, and the detective that was interviewing him was feeling like he was trying to just deflect questions and turn suspicion off of himself. He wasn't even answering basic questions in a way that made sense.
What's the highest grade you went through school?
I don't know. I don't know.
You don't know what the highest grade you went through?
Eighth?
Eighth grade? Did you graduate?
Yeah.
Do you have a GED?
I don't know.
You don't know what?
I don't know. I don't know. I just want to go home.
Go home. Right now.
So as you can tell, he can't even answer basic questions about himself. He just keeps saying, "I don't know." When he's asked Heather's last name, he says he doesn't know, and then he gives the wrong last name, and he just keeps saying, "I want to go home, I want to go to sleep," and just answering everything with "I don't know," or answers that make no sense.
You don't know a lot, Ryan.
I don't, man. I really don't.
Did you shoot Heather?
Mm-mm.
I heard you have a lot of guns in your house.
Mm-mm.
No?
Mm-mm.
You know we're gonna look.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, why don't you tell me what really happened there? Because I don't believe.
I really don't know, man. I really don't. I don't know. I can tell you anything, I swear.
I want you to tell me the truth. That's all I want. from
Richie
you.
and his dad came there. And I don't know why. I don't know why.
Okay, this is part 2 of the murder of Heather Kwan when Ryan Waller was being interviewed. If you haven't seen part 1, go watch it in the comment that is linked here because this is a crazy case. So Ryan's being interviewed, he is making no sense, he just keeps saying, "I don't know," and not answering the detective's questions. The detective asks, "Did you shoot Heather?" And Ryan says, "No, it was Richie and his dad." So the detective is like, "Okay, who is Richie?" And Ryan says he used to live in the apartment, and the detective is just so confused. This continues to go on for more time. The detective's trying to figure out what Ryan's talking about and find out what happened to Heather. But at one point, the detective kind of starts becoming a little bit more suspicious about Ryan's black eye.
I don't know, man. I really don't know.
Why did you shoot Heather, Ryan?
I didn't shoot Heather. She was already shot once by her brother, I swear.
Richie.
Yes.
Richie shot his own sister.
Yes, I swear. That's it.
Sit down.
Not me.
And you've been shot in the eye.
Yes. That's it.
Put your feet off my table, please.
My feet hurt, man. I don't know why.
Get them off my table. Let me see your nose. All right, put your legs down. Put your legs down. Bring your face closer.
Oh, my head hurts.
Okay. Yeah, be right back.
So as you could see from that last clip, the detective was basically getting more and more frustrated, and that's when he started to realize that maybe something was up with this black eye that Ryan had. Ryan had said he got shot, but it didn't look like there was a bullet in his head, but the detective kind of started thinking maybe there was. So he left the room, and then when he came back, he unhandcuffed Ryan, and he said that paramedics were coming to look at him. Ryan had been shot in the eye, and the bullet was still in his head. Ryan was rushed to the hospital, taken into surgery, and ended up losing one of his eyes and a large part of his brain. Although he survived, he was never the same, and he actually passed away just 10 years later from complications from this injury. Now, there's not a ton of information out there about the actual crime, but police figured out that Richie was the perpetrator. This was Richie Carver, Ryan's former roommate, and on the evening of December 23rd, 2 days before Ryan and Heather were found, they ambushed the couple and were trying to get stuff back and ended up shooting both Ryan and Heather. And Richie is now serving life in prison, and that's the story.
On this day in 2017, a man opened fire at North Park Elementary School in California. That morning, 53-year-old Cedric Anderson entered the school. His wife, 53-year-old Karen Smith, was a teacher there, and they had recently separated. Anderson had a history of domestic violence with several of his past partners, and had threatened to kill Karen in the weeks leading up to the shooting. He entered Karen's classroom and fatally shot her at close range without saying a word. 2 students were shot, including 8-year-old Jonathan Martinez, who would die from his injuries. Anderson then reloaded the gun and took his own life. Months later, the family of Jonathan Martinez would sue the school district, citing that the school shooting could have been avoided. It stated that Karen Smith exhibited signs of physical abuse, injury, distress, and fear. In the weeks before the shooting, she came to school with facial trauma that she attempted to hide by wearing dark sunglasses for several days.
This is the story of one of the largest kidnappings to ever happen in the United States. This is just going to be an overview. If you want all of the details and the full story, go listen to the latest episode of my podcast. On July 15th, 1976, in Chowchilla, California, bus driver Ed Ray picked up a group of 26 students after they went on a summer class field trip. As he was on the route home, he noticed a van stopped ahead, and he tried to maneuver around it, but when he realized it wasn't moving, he came to a stop. Then, 3 armed men got out of the van and forced their way inside the bus. They then drove the bus to meet up with another van and made all of the kids jump from the bus to 2 separate reinforced vans like this one. They then drove the kids and Ed around, locked in the back of these vans in the sweltering summer heat for 11 hours. One of the men also abandoned the bus in a drainage ditch and covered it in debris to try to conceal it. After driving around for 11 hours, they arrived at a rock quarry, which was about 100 miles away from Chowchilla. There, they forced Ed and the children to go into this underground truck trailer that they had buried 12 feet underground. Inside, they had put mattresses, some food and water, and turned the wheel wells into toilets. Once everybody was inside, they covered the top with a heavy metal object and then began piling dirt on top of it. And as you can see, the roof started caving in. Ed was doing everything he could to keep the younger children calm, some of which who were just 5 years old. After about 12 hours, Ed realized that they needed to do something to escape, so they stacked up the mattresses to reach the top. And that's when Ed, along with one of the oldest students, 14-year-old Michael, began trying to move whatever was on top of this hole. It turned out it was a manhole cover and 2 100-pound industrial batteries. Eventually, they were able to move it and were able to dig their way out. Ed then helped all of the kids escape, and they took off looking for help in the rock quarry. Eventually, they found someone who called police, and when police arrived, the kids were so happy. They took the kids to a local jail to be able to evaluate them and give them food and water, because this was the closest place that could house all of them. And eventually, the kids were taken back to Chowchilla to reunite with their parents. Ed Ray was an absolute hero, but the only problem was they did not know where or who the kidnappers were. Eventually, they started looking into the son of the owner of the rock quarry, Frederick Woods. And they discovered that him, along with 2 of his friends, Richard and James Schoenfeld, had recently been arrested and paroled. They got a search warrant for Woods' property and found this document that said plan that detailed exactly what they were doing. They also found this list of all of the kids' names that the kidnappers had written down. Go to part 2 for an explanation of why they did this. Okay, let's try this again. This is part 2 of the Chowchilla case. So pretty quickly, police were able to determine that 24-year-old Fred Woods, along with 22-year-old James Schoenfeld and 24-year-old Richard Schoenfeld, were responsible. They actually found this document in the house where Fred Woods was living that literally is titled Plan and says stop the bus, transfer the occupants, put them to sleep, take them to hideout, lock them in. It also talks about the ransom and what could go wrong. At his estate, they also found a list of the names of all the kids written on the back of a Jack-in-the-Box wrapper that the men had basically written down their names as they transferred them from the bus to the van. 8 days after the escape, Richard Schoenfeld turned himself in and confessed. And then 2 weeks later, Fred Woods and James Schoenfeld were both finally captured. They actually pled guilty to the actual thing that they did. I don't want to say it, but to that. But they did not want to plead guilty to this. That's because those charges in conjunction would require a life sentence without the possibility of parole. So they did go to trial for that second charge and were convicted, but a few years later, an appellate court overturned that conviction and they were sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. In 2012, Richard Schoenfeld was released, and in 2015, James Schoenfeld was released. And now, in 2022, 70-year-old Fred Woods is up for parole. He has served 46 years in prison, and his parole is now eligible. Basically, there's a 120-day waiting period for the parole to become final, and once it does, the governor of California has 30 days to either send it to the full parole board for approval or just approve it. So we will be finding out soon, and I will definitely update you guys when we know. Ed Ray unfortunately passed away in 2012, but he is remembered as a hero. In Chowchilla, there was a park named after him, and every February 26th, his birthday is known as Ed Ray Day. Many of the children, who are obviously now all adults, still live with significant trauma from that day. A lot of them do not believe that Fred Woods should be getting parole because they are serving life sentences of these traumatic memories, and they believe that the men should have all served life sentences as well. But that is the story of one of the largest abductions in U.S. history.